How long have you been listening to Talking Drupal? Do you have any idea?
It's funny because it was around that time because I hadn't heard about it prior to them inviting me to join it.
Okay.
I believe it was John that invited me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we ran into each other. It might have been DrupalCon Austin,
Mm-hmm.
um, or it could have just been a case where he reached out to me and I took the call. But um, that was the first time I really heard about it is whenever I ended up on that episode. And I've listened to it kind of pretty consistently over the years ever since. There's been some times where, maybe my work took me a little bit away from Drupal and was a little bit less free time to be able to listen to it. But these days, I don't miss an episode, especially with the time that we're in with Drupal. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
change going on. And I think the voices that they bring in there to talk about that change have been really um, sometimes inspiring, sometimes a little unnerving. It can be a little bit of both right now, but
Okay.
it's definitely one of those things that um, it's worth listening to for that reason.
Mhm. So, you've been a guest host and you've been a guest for several episodes and you've been a constant listener. So, how would you differentiate the experience between all this?
Um, well, I would say being a guest is kind of interesting because they do a really good job of setting you up for success.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I was impressed with, and I think they've gotten way better at over the years as well. Especially now that there's kind of like a shared Google Doc of show notes, and you're kind of working from not necessarily a script, but at least you know what you're going to be talking about.
Okay.
And I think that's really important, especially
Mhm.
for people who aren't regular public speakers. And they do just a great job with that. They do a great job of communicating with you leading up to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty amazing. So, as a guest, you feel taken care of when you're going on their podcast. Um, the guest host experience was really interesting. They just started doing that in the last couple of years, where they bring somebody on for several episodes to be a guest host.
Okay.
Um, and that's been fun. You don't have to prepare as much. You can basically, show up and you don't even have to know much about the topic because you're going to be kind of given an opportunity to ask a couple questions and get involved in the conversation, and that's been fun. Um, so I think whether it's being a guest or a guest host, they're definitely taking care of you. Um, as a listener, I would say. I typically don't watch the video. I typically listen to the audio, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
usually working while I do it. So
Mm-hmm.
I will find myself doing the whole wait, I got to go back and listen to that again because I missed something. I was too focused on what I was working on. But it's one of those things where I still think the value is so high that it's worth taking the time to listen, even if it's a topic that I don't really care that much about. So.
Okay. So, were you someone who used to listen to podcast, or did you this that did Talking Drupal capture your attention because you were a guest and it's all related with Drupal? How did the connection happen?
It was probably one of the first podcasts that I
Mm-hmm.
regularly listened to. Some of the things that I regularly listened to that would be podcast format now were like radio shows before. So I would actually, listen to the radio show on Saturday
Mm-hmm.
morning or whatever. I used to be big about listening to like NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me or
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, things that are at a regularly scheduled time. And the nice thing with podcasts is it does give you that ability to not have to like be on that schedule. You can listen to it whenever you'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I've shifted. Almost everything that I regularly listen to is now in either a podcast format or at least a streaming format. So.
Uh, so do you have any favorite episodes per se? Like you've been listening constantly for a couple of years now, so
Hmm.
it's a tricky question, obviously.
I should, yeah, that's a tough question. I'd almost have to pull up the episode list. Give me just a second.
Okay.
That's actually speaking of pulling up the episode list, I think they did a really nice job with their redesign of their website because it makes it really easy to track down episodes and kind of
Yeah.
take a look at it. And
I was
um,
just having a conversation with Nick just before. He's like, it's my idea. I did it. I'm proud of it.
well, it looks good. Nick
Yeah.
deserves some kudos for that. I, if I'm kind of looking through some of the ones that if I were talking about one that I was a guest host on, I really
Mhm.
loved doing the session with Tim Lennon where he and I talked about Drupal.org then and now,
Mhm.
kind of the
Yeah, we did
changes the
that.
Drupal Association has gone through. That was
Recently?
great to catch up with Tim.
The recent
That
episode?
was episode. Yeah, it's a recent episode. I think it was last
Post
year
77.
sometime. That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
If I'm thinking about ones that I wasn't on,
Yeah.
um, it's kind of geeky, but I enjoyed the conversation about Access Policy API
Uh-huh.
because it's something that I was directly interested in because of a lot of the sites that I build.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can't remember which episode it was, but they did one on recipes right around the time that recipes was put into place. That I was just like, oh, okay, that's a really good explanation of that concept and why it's going to, change the way we work in the Drupal sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Having more repeatable things that we just kind of compact down um, and knock out in a project so that we can lower some of
Mm-hmm.
those upfront costs on a project and work on the more fun things, the things that we're not just repeating the config over and over and over again. So
So, being a constant listener, do you recommend the podcast to other people? Does talking Drupal come up in your conversations with fellow Drupalers?
it has a little bit, the PDX. I live in Portland, Oregon, so the
Mm-hmm.
Portland Drupal user group. We've talked about that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of really close friends that also that don't work with them anymore, but I did work with them, and so
Mm-hmm.
we'll sometimes fire episodes back and forth to each other whenever it's a topic that's that I know that like my buddy James, he does a lot of front end stuff. So if I hear a front end topic that I know he would kind of appreciate and get into, I'll fire it his direction, that sort of thing.
So
Um,
you, oh yeah, please continue.
oh no, no, go ahead.
Okay, so you're going to be a part of 500th episode for Talking Drupal. How do you feel about that? It's such a big milestone. Average lifespan of a podcast is like 6, 7 episodes, but here we are after 12 years, 500 episodes. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I would say it's kind of similar to my feeling about being in the Drupal community for so many
Mm-hmm.
years. When you when you realize how long it's been, it seems a little unreal. Like it
Mm-hmm.
can't have been
It can't be.
over a decade. Like that just seems weird to think.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I've definitely added some gray over the time that I've listened to this podcast. Um, it I'm trying to think of something that would be a really good quote, but um, it reminds you of the staying power of open source
Mm-hmm.
and in particular of Drupal.
Mm-hmm.
That a few sometimes goofy
Mm-hmm.
guys can really make a go at a podcast that is literally them just talking about software, like
Mm-hmm.
about technology. There are plenty of other technology podcasts out there. There are some that are probably a little bit um, less insightful because they're not so
Mm-hmm.
focused.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that's really powerful about talking Drupal, having
Mm-hmm.
that focus on Drupal specifically. I
Mm-hmm.
think um, if you make your living doing Drupal, it makes sense to listen to this podcast because you're going to learn something. Maybe not every episode, but often you will learn something new.
Okay. So you've been uh, I was told by Stephen that you've been a constant listener and you do communicate with the people. I believe you are the member of a Slack group they are running. So there will be discussions regarding every episodes and
Hmm.
stuff. But so over the years, have you made any recommendations to dropping Drupal? Like this would be a better thing, or this particular module, or this particular software would be a good uh, talk. So have you made any recommendations? Have that recommendation reflected in the episodes and anything of that sort?
Yeah, a few times. I know that there was one of the episodes that I was guest hosting that I had thrown out the module of the week and said, "Hey, this is a good module of the week.
Okay.
We should take a look at that." Can't remember which one it was now. That's awful,
Mhm.
but and yeah, it's kind of a fun little sub channel. That their Slack channel is a good way to reach out and ping them with ideas. Episode ideas, definitely topics that they might want to cover. And they're very open to it, which is very cool. So,
Great. So being in Drupal and being associated in the like you've been very you told me you brought on Tim Lehanan into Drupal Association. So you have been someone who had the capacity to make changes. You are in someone in a position of power. So definitely there is this let's say people we have discussions happening lately about how new beginners are not coming into Drupal, right? That we are not able to attract young talent into the community and so forth. How do you think this podcast? So because podcast is a very important medium at the moment. So how podcasts like Talking Drupal could be a motive to bring in new people into Drupal?
I was really impressed with the little session that they did with, oh God, I'm trying to remember his name right now. The skills upgrade that they did with
Chart Hester, I think.
Chad Hester. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think things like that
Mm-hmm.
do show
Mm-hmm.
new Drupal computer contributors how they could get involved and do things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know that Talking Drupal is necessarily for a brand new contributor. I think if somebody came in and listened to that and they hadn't really
Yeah, know
gone to a
about.
Drupal camp before or a Drupal con, if they hadn't gone to a Drupal user group,
Mm-hmm.
it would feel weird and geeky.
Okay.
It's not something that I think would appeal to somebody who had no kind of community
Oh,
aspect to
okay.
their role in Drupal. But I do think that, like, once you've been using Drupal for, you know, a project or two,
Mm-hmm.
um, it makes a lot of sense because it introduces you to all those things that you may not have heard of and gives you
Mm-hmm.
terms that you can go search and say, oh, okay, I'm going to use that module of the week, or
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm going to use that concept that they talked about that's a new Drupal feature and a new version or what have you. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I don't know what if I would call it a new contributor resource, but definitely like an early contributor resource. So like
Okay.
if you've done a Drupal project, you should start listening to it. If
Sure.
if you if you're trying to learn Drupal from the beginning, I would probably start with something uh, like a Drupal easy training or Drupalize me, or there's some other getting started documentation that's out there that I think is a better gateway. But then
Mm-hmm.
once you're in, going from there, you know, it's
Yeah.
it's interesting because not necessarily specific to Talking Drupal, but it's definitely something that I've talked about over the years. The contribution uh, credit system, the fact that we
Mm-hmm.
have issue credits.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually something that Dries and he introduced it to me in DrupalCon Austin, literally wrote it on the back of a napkin while we were having a Drupal Association board dinner or something like that. Um, and he's like, this could be the get commit message that, gives somebody an issue credit. And we kind of workshopped it back and forth. And the team that we built up at that time, which included Tim, still drum was still there,
Mm-hmm.
Jacob Perry and Emily Nouveau. I mean, like we had a really cool team. Oliver Davies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we all worked together to put that contribution credit concept into the issue queues. And I think that was probably one of the best, biggest contributions that I've had to the community over the
Okay.
years. Um, and I think the fact that you hear the guys talk about that on Talking Drupal, and
Mm-hmm.
particularly Nick's efforts recently to become a certified partner by really increasing his contribution credit, um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a way to kind of explain to folks that you can have a role fairly quickly in the Drupal community through contribution. Like
Okay.
it doesn't take years and years. If you are willing to jump in and contribute to something, you can get that.
Okay.
I
Great.
almost want to say karma. You can get that karma really quickly.
Okay. Just wanted to ask. So you've been a listener for too long right now. So how would you say Talking Drupal has evolved? Like, has there been significant changes or in the presentation style or something? Like, how has it evolved over the years? How has it become more interesting?
Um, that their basic format has been the same for a long time. I think they've just really polished it in terms
Mm-hmm.
of making sure that they can get through an hour-long episode and cover a range of topics, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, I'm trying to remember all the way back. I think the audio and video is both both have increased as they figured out new tools to use, and increase in quality as they figure out those new tools. Um, Honestly, if I think back to some of those earliest episodes, the banter, the back and forth, the what they're just talking about, it's all very familiar. It's something that has stayed very similar over the years. It's kind of like if you go and watch an episode of Cheers after not watching the TV show Cheers for a very long time. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but
I'm not.
uh,
I'm not. I haven't
uh,
heard of Cheers.
haven't watched it. I think it holds up. It's about a Boston bar, and
Okay.
the characters that live in that bar, if you will, well, they go to the bar regularly, though you would think they lived there for how much time they spend in it. Um, it's kind of one of those timeless things that it just
Is it
holds up.
sitcom?
The jokes,
Like
yeah, sitcom. It's from like
like
the
Fre
80s.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Like I'm familiar with
Yeah.
this Friends and How I Met Your Mother, the stuff that has been,
Oh yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
a lot of the people that were in those later sitcoms will talk about how they would watch Cheers to learn how to do it, because Cheers was
Okay.
like one of the like
Yeah.
really big 80s hits in terms of Ted Danson, who if you watch The Good Place, he plays Michael in The Good Place. So he was the main character of Cheers way back in the day
Oh,
too.
great. I'll catch that up. And also, I have to ask you this. So, being a listener to the podcast for too long, would you change anything? Like, if
Oh,
you are given a
change
chance.
anything. I would not I would not deign to assume that I know what they should
Mhm,
change. I'm just going to say that I think the fact that they've been willing to stick through it this long and
mhm,
really that commitment, because it's not a small time commitment.
mhm,
The fact that they've been able to continue to do that over and over and over again, I wouldn't want to tell them to change something that might take away
mhm,
the joy that they get from doing it, because
mhm.
um, frankly, that's how a passion project like this lasts so long, is because someone enjoys doing it. So I won't say don't change a thing, but only change it if you really want to, because if it's giving you joy, that's the important part.
Yeah, okay. And I'm thinking I've pretty much asked you everything I'm looking for, but do you have anything extra to add from your part? Because I am trying to ask every other people different questions. So I had a conversation with James Shields, and he's also a
Mhm.
constant listener to the podcast. So he had a bit more emotional approach towards the podcast, like how he came to know about the podcast and stuff like that. So do you have any note like that? Maybe something I can put at the snippet on LinkedIn.
Mm. Um, ah, don't have anything off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just wanted to know, like, do you have any special connection, any particular memory associated with talking to people that you would like to share?
Yeah, Sorry, I'll think about that. And if anything comes up, I'll fire you an email. But I
All
don't have
right.
anything anything that we haven't already talked about that I would add on right now.
Mhm. All right. Also, I just wanted to ask, how important do you think initiatives like Talking Drupal are in the Drupal community in the present scenario? Because it's a completely passion-driven project and it has come out so far, so long. So how do you think, why do you think initiatives such as Talking Drupal is important in the working of this Drupal community?
Oh, yeah, it's critical to helping people keep up their
Mm-hmm.
Drupal skills
Mm-hmm.
and keep informed.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of internal teams at organizations where I come in and I train them, right? And I almost always like there's three things that I tell them that they must do. They must sign up for the weekly drop.
Mm-hmm.
They must sign up for uh, or at least start following the drop times.
Mm-hmm.
And they must subscribe to Talking Drupal. And it's not that they have to read every last thing and all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but if those projects, if they're staying on top of those, they're going to get pointed to other things. They're going to learn about Drupalize Me. They're going to learn about Drupal Easy. They're going to learn about um, contributors in the world of Drupal that are doing something important to
Mm-hmm.
try to move Drupal forward. So I do think that podcasts and newsletters are critical pieces of content for um, getting kind of a, it, um, developers on a learning journey to get them
Mm-hmm.
towards knowing Drupal a bit better.
Okay, so I've pretty much covered everything, and